States are right to protect their citizens from the fraudulent claims of sexual orientation change therapists.
I'm not so sure if states should be involved in this subject.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark. And I would also like to welcome you to today's program. The American Religious Town Hall meeting has been around for a long time. We hope you have too, but if you're new to the program, a special welcome to you. Now, you've heard from two of our panelists. You haven't heard their names yet or what they do, so I'd like for you to meet them all. Let's begin with the gentleman to my right.
Shalom, I'm Rabbi Phil Bentley, retired, living in Hendersonville, North Carolina.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, District of Columbia.
I'm Andrea Luxon. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Congregation is a part of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ.
And I'm Othel H. Lakey, a bishop in retirement of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, living in Buford, Georgia.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship, Garland, Texas.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Let's go right to our subject now. Sexual orientation change therapy is a controversial practice, especially within certain religious communities. The California State Assembly has taken action against it in ways that many feel could open the door for the prohibition of certain religious speech and the banning of churches and mosques teaching that homosexual behavior is wrong. Many religious organizations and even some licensed professional therapists have practiced sexual orientation change therapy for decades. The practice is sometimes referred to by its detractors as an effort to pray the gay away, but includes techniques like hypnosis, dating training, and cognitive redirection. Some practitioners have included electroshock in the range of therapies employed. Numerous studies have shown that the practice is at best ineffective and at worst quite harmful to patients, contributing to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and even suicide. Nonetheless, those who affirm the practice point to the many people who claim to have been changed. In February of 2018, the California State Assembly passed AB 2943, outlawing the sale of such therapy under the general state interest to protect citizens from fraudulent business claims and practices. Proponents claimed the measure would have no effect on religious speech or free exercise, and that it would not even outlaw the practice of such therapy, but that it simply outlawed the sale of which services. Opponents argue that the bill bans Christian book sales that touch on the issue. Some even say the Assembly's action could be interpreted to allow state authorities to ban the sale of Bibles. Today, I'm asking our panelists at least three questions to consider. The first is, can sexual orientation change therapy really change a person from gay to straight? Second question, is the California effort leading the country down the road to severe restrictions on religious practice? And then finally, do any of our panelists refer people to sexual orientation change therapy? That is our subject for today. Again, I'm so glad you've tuned in. Let's hear from the panelists now. We'll go back to those who helped to begin the program. For that, we go back to Tom. Welcome, Tom Plumley. Reverend Plumley, glad to have you here. You began with an opening statement. Please elucidate that, please, at this time.
Thank you. I have had folks in my congregation tell me that they have been through sexual orientation change therapy. and they've told me all about it, and they've told me that it doesn't work, and therefore I do not, as your question asks, whether I refer people to this sort of therapy. I do not do that. I think that California was wise in the move that they made. And do note that they did not outlaw the practice. They just simply said this is a fraudulent business practice, and we do have the right to regulate that, and therefore you can do this. You just simply can't charge for it. And so I think that these kinds of decisions need to be based upon science. Let's find out what works and what doesn't work by scientific methods. Let's be open to those methods. Find out what is repeatable, and teach those things. And the religious community can still teach and preach what it wants to do, to teach and preach about the practice of homosexuality, or to the LGBTQ community, or to whomever. But the sale of fraudulent, unproven therapies is beyond the pale.
All right, thank you very much. And Kenneth Peterson, you started by saying you're not sure if the state should be involved in this discussion or decision making at all, right?
That's what I said.
Okay, can you please tell us more about that?
First off, regardless of what you might think of the California State Assembly Law, AB 2943, that was passed in both the California Assembly as well as in the Senate. However, in California, when a bill passes both the Assembly and the Senate, the law does not become law until the bill receives approval from the final versions by both houses. On September 3rd, 2018, the last day of the legislative session in California, Assemblyman Law, and he is the person who originally presented this piece of legislation, announced that he had pulled AB 2943. This meant that the bill would not be voted on in the Assembly, and hence the bill could not go to the governor to be signed into law. In other words, the bill died. Let me share with you an editorial headline that appeared in the LA Times concerning the bill. This is a direct quote. "Conversion therapy for gays is awful, but so is the California bill to ban it." As I read through the bill, and as I read through much of the material that had been published, I must say I agree with the LA headline. Like so many volatile subjects in our culture today, there is no via media, no middle way. Fear tactics and scare tactics polarize every single debate. For example, headlines like "Liberty Counsel Warning, California about to ban Bible sales," or "California pushes a bill that appears to ban sales of the Bible." Read the bill to see that the law is a ban on the Bible in California is simply false. There is nothing in that bill that indicates anything about the Bible or saying that any Bibles are going to be banned. Such misrepresentations of the facts is simply fear-mongering. I'm going to stop at this point.
All right. Well, thank you very much to help us start the program today. Let's come down the table. Bishop Lakey, welcome to the program. Your thoughts on the subject,
Thank
please.
you so much. As some of you may remember, several years ago, I did a book. I was doing some research on sexual orientation. I set out to prove that my church's position that homosexuality was a sin was correct. However, in my research, I've determined that according to the way my church interprets sin as a voluntary sin against God's will and way, a sexual orientation, homosexuality is not a sin in that sense, because I determined from my research that in many instances it is innate. Given that, I agree that therapists for sexuality doesn't work. I agree with Tom. But I also agree that religions ought to have a right to try. You know, praying for the gay, from gay to be straight is okay. It's like praying for the sun not to rise. You know, you're just praying and you're praying. But the church or the religious community needs to step back and not allow the state to get too involved in some of these religious orientated things. That ought to be I think, a religious discussion, not a assembly discussion of the state legislature.
Thank you so much. And then next to you is Dr. Luxton. Welcome to the program. Your thoughts, please.
I mean, I've spoken to some that feel that this does work. Has worked for them, and I've spoken to others that feel it's completely wrong. I lean to thinking that this is not the right way. However, I agree with some of the other comments I've made. I don't think it's the state's responsibility to try and micromanage what kind of therapy should or should not be used. I do think there can be trials and management of it, especially in the case of minors, for example. But you know, there are many other questions about which we don't have answers. I mean, even when you think about gender reassignment, you know, some reports say that actually gender reassignment results in more depression and more suicides than before gender reassignment. I'm not arguing that that is right, but the question is that when we try and make judgments and laws based on what is right or wrong on something that we don't really have all the evidence on, I think we run into dangerous territory. It's kind of ironic in some ways. We're in an environment where in some ways we are legalizing more and more. I mean, we're legalizing marijuana, we're legalizing other things, and we have multiple uses for that. Well, it's better for people to choose, right, than for us to legislate. But in here, we're thinking about legislating more, and I just don't think legislation is the right way of dealing with it. But I do agree that I think the rhetoric that says, and this means this and this and this is going to happen is too much too. I just don't think that's right.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Matthews, welcome back to the program. Your thoughts on this subject?
Very interesting topic. I agree with what Dr. Luxton said, that for some people, they say this therapy works and others say it doesn't. I don't know if it works or if it doesn't work. I've never spoken with someone who has gone through the sexual orientation therapy. I will say, though, that it's somewhat alarming for the state to get involved. And although there may not be anything written in the law itself, or that Bibles will be banned, or the censorship of churches and religious organizations, I'm not ready to say that it will not happen. So it's a slippery slope for me whenever the state gets involved. And let me just say also that I think we need to just treat people with dignity and respect. And we have to be careful in the religious community allowing the state to come in and kind of dictate what we do. That's just where I am.
All right, thank you very much. Rabbi Bentley, good to have you here again today. Your position, please.
I have many friends who are LGBT and Q. In every case where I have discussed this with them, it is not something they chose. It is something that they discovered about themselves. And the fact is that it is a matter of brain chemistry. That people whose sexual orientation is, for example, someone of the same gender, is the same mechanism that makes us who are straight attracted to people of the opposite gender. That this is a religious question at all disturbs me very greatly. In the Old Testament, there are 2 verses that refer to a homosexual act. I believe there is one verse in one of the Pauline letters that makes direct reference, but none of it refers to the scientific reality that sexuality, one's sexual orientation, one's gender preference is a matter of science. It is a matter of how we were born, or if you will, how we were created. I also think that where it comes to children, this is endangerment of children, because the negative outcomes, which do include depression, poor self-esteem leads to things like alcoholism and drug addiction and other such behaviors, and many suicides. About a third of all transsexuals at some time in their life attempt suicide. That is not because of the being a transsexual, and I know very well transsexuals. It is because of how they are treated by society. And now it just got worse when they have been by law defined, or an attempt is being made to define them by law out of existence. That is a terrible imposition of politics over science.
All right, thank you very much. And Reverend Plumlee, coming back to some of the statements you were making regarding what California has decided, that they can't use abusive tactics, correct? Or they can't charge for the therapy. Is that correct? Did I hear you correct about that?
Yeah, this was an attempt to
Yes.
create a partial measure. It was not the banning of this practice. It was an attempt to say we got some real questions about this. Therefore, we don't want people engaging in fraudulent business practices generally in our communities. Therefore, until you can prove to us that this actually does something besides send people into greater depression and make them more likely to commit suicide, then we're going to say you cannot sell that product in our state.
Right.
And it was the measure was withdrawn. It is not the law of California. I'm simply saying that states should look at this as a way of protecting their citizens.
Dr. Williams, you wanted to respond?
From a biblical standpoint, and this may not be popular, in fact, it probably isn't in the culture we live in, I do think the question should be asked, let me say, I don't like isolating what people call sin. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going on that's wrong. But is this part of the fall? Could it be part of the fall? We all make mistakes. I think that needs to be answered. I just don't want to just brush the Bible away, because the scripture is pretty clear with this type of act. And also, to the rabbi's comment about the chemicals in the brain, how do we explain a person who was gay and then became straight? Did the chemicals switch? So I think we have to be careful with that. Is it a switch back and forth? But at the end of the day, I do think we need to treat people with dignity and respect. But there are a lot of people out in the Christian community who believe that this lifestyle is not God's idea, along with a whole lot of other sins. Okay.
All right, thank you. Dr. Luxon, you had signaled that you wanted to make a comment.
I just want to get back to the whole sense of depression and suicide. And we know that the LGBT community is the levels of depression, the levels of suicide, the levels of anxiety are way, way above the regular population. What I have not seen is evidence that this particular therapy makes that worse than what is already a really complicated, really difficult situation. And I think if we're going to take any legal action, we need to be really sure, looking at the scientific side of it, looking at the evidence, research side of it, that we really have evidence that it is so much more damaging. Personally, I'm not a fan of it, right? But I don't have evidence to say that it is actually so wrong that we should be saying this is fraudulent. When some say, well, actually, no, it did work for me. I mean, I don't know. It's very, very complicated. I just think we need to be very careful that we don't pick a solution, particularly as a government, and say, this group is wrong. So we still haven't solved the bigger problem, which is this is a huge issue for many people.
Thank you. You know, we're out of time for this segment, I know, but we're going to have summations. Maybe you can save it. Some of you have signaled you wanted to say more, but I'm sorry, we have no more time in this particular segment. But there is an important announcement I'd like for you to stand by for. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you. And as Mark just said, I do look forward to hearing from you. If you'll send us a card, maybe go to the website, you can send us an email, or regular mail will do just fine. We love looking forward to hearing from you and having you make suggestions about programs you'd like to see, topics you'd like to have discussed. That is all very important to us. And thank you for your weekly support. Now let's go to our summations. Let's begin with Rabbi Bentley.
Thank you. I think that there is nothing wrong with someone who is LGBT or Q, and the only kind of sexual orientation therapy would not be for change. It would be for that individual to be able to accept who they are and the burdens, the social burdens and cultural burdens that go with it. Otherwise, the idea of change is harmful.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now, Dr. Luxton, your summation, please.
I do think that religious organizations need to be careful that they don't try and solve everything. Some things within our world are just not resolvable that way. And I think the danger of people feeling that they can change when some can't is a problem. It does put pressure on people. However, I think when it comes to the state, we need to be very, very careful that states do not think they should micromanage what happens within, say, a counseling environment to say this approach is right and this approach is wrong. I think there needs to be a level of individual freedom and choice when it comes to that.
Thank you very much. And now Bishop Lakey.
Thank you. We are created in the image and likeness of God, including our sexuality. We humans should not impose on other human beings our understanding of their sexuality. Let God be God. Let humans be human. And let us all try to live with faith in the God who created us.
Thank you, Bishop Lakey. And now, Dr. Matthews, your summation.
Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect, and given the unconditional love of God and the freedom of speech and religious liberty are very precious, and the states, we need to have checks and balances with states that try to intrude in the arena of religious liberty.
All right, thank you for your participation today, Dr. Matthews. And now, Reverend Plumley, your summation.
Thank you. So much about this whole area of our communal life and our individual lives is disagreed about. We're talking about something that is so central to our identities, so central to our our self-understandings, yet one fraught with so much misunderstanding and even confusion. And I would say not only confusion, social confusion, confusion as a corporate body, but often confusion within the individual. I think our best stance always, the bottom line always, is for the religious community simply to stand up and say, let's love and appreciate each other. Let's figure out how God wants each of us to live as God created us to live, and let's appreciate the way. I hope you appreciate the way I love, and I will give you the opportunity and appreciate the way you love.
All right, thank you very much, Reverend Plumley. And now Canon Peterson, your summation.
Yes, I would like to really pick up on both Rabbi Phil's comment as well as Othel's. It seems to me that if we believe that we are created in the image of God, if we really believe that, if we really believe that what God creates is good, then I have a hard time trying to understand the social negative criticism that gay people have to experience so often in their lives. If we really believe that God created perfectly and that we are in that image. And so I want to just leave that thought with you today, of when, particularly when we see what is going on in our own social structures.
Well, thank you very much, and to everyone for your participation today. And I thank you for the sensitivity with which you've used to approach this subject. We're glad for each one of you being able to come here to participate in this exercise of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And we hope that you felt comfortable doing this. I certainly do with you, and look forward to being with you again. For now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.